and thank you to the Council of Native Hawaiian Advancement for giving me this opportunity to address the annual conference. Today's presentation is inspired in large part by a whole range of experiences during my lifetime at Kahalu'ukona, at a place called Po'o, Hawaii. To a certain extent, what we all have in common is at some level we are all experiencing huliau, or a sense that we are at the turning point of transformation. And for me, this whole experience was accented in September 2017, when the telescopes on Haleakala, and then by those on Mauna Kea, depicted the first of its kind, an interstellar asteroid, originating from outside our universe and passing through. This had never been detected before, and it was given this beautiful name by Dr. Larry Kimura, Oumuamua, the messenger from the distant past. In the months that followed, we saw the eruptions of Puna, devastating, awesome, beautiful, and for months on end. 6 months later, again back on Haleakala, images of the black hole, given again a name by Dr. Larry Kimura, Po'ovehi, the source of unending creation. 6.5 billion times the mass of the sun in an awesome distance from planet Earth. More than a year later, we saw an incredible movement on the Mauna. Led by many friends and family members, a major statement was made that we, in fact, were experiencing a transformative moment in the history of Native Hawaiians and Hawaii in general. It was that same year, 2019, that we ended up surpassing the number of visitor arrivals. For the first time, we passed the 10 million mark, 10,400,000 plus. And 3 months later, a global pandemic hit and economic collapse began. Shortly after, in June, an announcement was made that the CEO at the time, Chris Tatum, decided to resign from the Hawaii Tourism Authority. And so for me, this sense of huliau was being accented by all of these events. On the surface, they look like they're separate. Inside myself, they seem to be telling me a story. And in June of 2020, it was announced by the governor that a new search and selection would take place for the new chief executive officer of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. And after days of consultation with my wife, I decided to become an applicant. It was an 8-week process, a grueling process that started with more than 300 applicants. And over those 8 weeks, I learned so much about myself. I was given the opportunity to author a presentation that was called Mālama Ku'uhome. The date was August 27th, and these were the quarterfinals of the interviews. At that time, Mālama Ku'uhome became a visceral statement on my part, because I took this very personally. I was born and raised in Waikiki. And while others were looking at the resort mecca of Hawaii tourism, what I also was looking at were the fishing grounds of my ohana and my neighbors. Where this yellow arrow is, 2 blocks from the beach, is where our family had our home, located today behind the Queen Kapiolani Hotel. However, the Waikiki I grew up in looked like this. This photo could have been taken this morning, and as a young boy, fishing on weekends with my uncles and cousins, this was the Waikiki we grew up in. So as I prepared to go before the selection committee that was searching for the new chief executive for HTA, I had to be clear within myself as to what my motivation to pursue a challenge like this at this stage of my life. These 3 aspects played a major role. Also in the back of my mind was a strategic plan that in January 2020, pre-pandemic, the board of HTA, after a year of conversations on each of the islands, in communities on all of the islands, came up with a strategic plan that adopted these 4 pillars. Add to it the pandemic, and all of a sudden, a commitment to responsible tourism now needs to shift, because the most responsible form of tourism on an island is regenerative tourism. And the pandemic has imposed certain standards onto our industry. Every touch point that a visitor comes into contact with, starting with the airline, the arrival airport, ground transportation, hotels, restaurants, and retail. Each one of those touch points, each of these areas now has to elevate their standards of hygiene, sanitation, sterilization at levels that heretofore were reserved for clinics and hospitals. If I was an employee that got laid off in March of this year, when I returned to my workplace, not only is my job description the one I had in March, but now there's a whole new echelon of responsibilities that I will inherit, and I am responsible for to keep my fellow workers safe and healthy, to keep my workplace and work environment safe and healthy, and in turn, provide the visiting guest with that safe environment. Conversely, the visitor is going to have to learn how to reciprocate with that same level of responsibility and sensitivity. And so I was clear at the time of the interviews as to how I would spend my first 100 days. And I come to you on day 18 of my arrival at HTA. And Malama Kuhome, becomes that guiding principle. In our work that lays ahead at HTA, Malama will be the organizing principle. Inside the chaos that has resulted from this economic collapse and this public health threat in the form of a global pandemic, inside this chaos, there was a need I felt to assert immediately an organizing principle. And Malama is that principle. Malama as a Hawaiian cultural value did not arrive with me. In many forms, it was already there at HTA. There's a program that you will hear about in which the visitor will be able to reciprocate and give back to Hawaii in some form, and that program will be called Mālama Hawaii. We were all inspired between 2014 and 2017, where after 3.5 years, the crew members and navigators of Hokulea went around the world carrying the message of Malama Honua, caring for island earth. Those of you familiar with the Hawaii Green Growth Initiative and the Aloha Plus Challenge will resonate and understand the importance and value of the Malama Mandate, which my predecessor at HTA was inspired enough to have every member on the staff sign the Malama Mandate. For those of you that are not familiar with it, please visit the Hawaii Green Growth website and become familiar with the Aloha Plus Challenge and the Malama Mandate. What I also knew was that in stepping into this job at HTA, that we were moving toward a voyage of recovery and a voyage of rediscovery. Recovering from this economic demise, recovering from this public health threat, and at the same time rediscovering our authentic identity, an identity that is more suited to who we are as a people, place, and as a society. And clearly I understand that this work is so important to care for the generations that will follow us, in particular the next 7. I want to give credit to certain people, a group of Native Hawaiians who coached me, guided me, prepared me to get through this competition at the Hawaii Tourism Authority. Malia Sanders, John Aero, Kirsten Kahaloa, and Elihia Johnson. I cannot thank them enough for their sacrifices and their commitment to help develop a winning strategy and a plan of implementation that resulted in me being appointed and selected the next CEO of HTA. To get more insights into all of this, I would welcome you to this Facebook address, where you will see the full Malama Ku'uhome presentation, as well as a speech, my last presentation, before joining HTA, which will outline much of what I'm talking about. And let me now move into the last segment here, Hawaii Reimagined. And during this period, in preparing for the Hawaii Tourism Authority vetting process and interview process, it was a very cathartic experience for me, because it gave me an opportunity to recall every step in my professional life, and more importantly, recall the mentors that I had, too many to name today. But having the opportunity to stop, pause, and give thanks to all of them, many of whom are no longer with us on this plane. One of my favorites was entertainer Don Ho, who happened to be my mother's high school classmate, the class of 1949, Kamehameha Schools. And in 1975, when I was at age 24, Don said something to me in private, which meant something then, and it means something more to me today. And Don said, as you mature in business, as you mature in life in Hawaii, John, remember there are two types of people, temporary and permanent. There's nothing wrong with temporary people. They bring new ideas and often new sources of capital. But my concern, he would say, is that for too long, Hawaii has been dominated by temporary people, and it's not their fault. Those of us who are permanent, like me and you, have to be able to elevate our game, elevate our ability to compete in business, and go face-to-face, toe-to-toe with anybody from any place in the world, and in so doing, reclaim our responsibility to our home. The other mentor, who I've turned to at many times, different times in my life, going back to 2001, I was faced with a career opportunity. It's controversial. It was here in South Kona. And I went to see Pua and explained some of what I was feeling. It involved a project site of about 1,500 acres in Kona. What was unique about the site was it happened to also be the burial place of my maternal grandmother, great-grandmother. And so I explained to Pua some of the sensations I was feeling and the decision that I had to make. A job was being offered to me to be president and chief executive of a major development company. And after hearing my story, Pua said, John, on the surface it appears to you that you have a choice. But underneath it, that choice has already been made. That is koho'ia. That is koho'ia. That sometimes the kuleana chooses you. You may think you have a choice, but the choice has been made because sometimes the kuleana chooses you. During that 8-week process in competing for the position of president and chief executive of HTA, about week number 5 in that competition, I started to feel again what I felt in 2001. Koho'ia, koho'ia. That the responsibility of dealing with this pandemic and dealing with this economic crisis was a responsibility that was calling me into leadership. And I'm grateful to her for that, for giving me that insight back in 2001 and again this past summer during the competition at HTA, where Pua was extremely helpful to me. Which brings me back to Po'o Hawaii, where one day my maternal grandmother gave me a lesson. We all grew up with the proverbial question, is the glass half full or half empty? If we said it was half full, we were optimists. Half empty, we were pessimists. But Grandma had a different view that she wanted me to understand. She wanted me to know that the glass is 100% filled, always has been, half with the water we drink, half with the air we breathe, and 100% of it is filled with light. All three of those elements, air, water, light, are life-giving. And she felt that it was wrong, somewhat arrogant, somewhat adolescent, to make reference to any of those three life-giving elements as being empty. It was not the right question. It was 100% filled. And what we breathed, our ancestors referred to as ha. That which we drank, they referred to as vai. And E was in reference to the light or the spirit. And in this metaphor that is well known throughout the world of the half glass of water is our very identity as a people. Our identity as a place and as a society, because we come from the islands of the life-giving waters. And that lesson was taught to me here at Poʻo Hawaiʻi by my maternal grandmother, for which I'm extremely grateful. It's been a pleasure, an honor, and a joy to present to you today. I wish all of you tremendous success in the remaining hours of this conference, and thank again Kuhio Lewis and his team at CNHA. Malama pono.